Welcome to Indiana Landmark Center. I'm Suzanne Stanis. I'm the Vice President of Education for Indiana Landmarks. And welcome to our attendees on Zoom. We will be using the Q&A feature on Zoom. So if you have questions, please type those in and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the program. So thanks again to all of you for joining us for this program this evening. It has been years, literally, in the making. A small group of us met back on March 13th, 2020, to discuss the idea of having a lecture and exhibit on the artwork of Harry Davis. And then the next week, as many of you may remember, our world was turned upside down by COVID. And so this was put on indefinite hold. And a very long fast forward, and we are finally here. So those of us who have been working on it, yes. We are very happy to have all of you here. So while I have years of experience coordinating educational events, this is the first time I've been involved with an art show. So myself and my colleagues want to thank Dee Dee Davis of the Herron School of Art and Design and Steve Town of University Library, Indiana University, Indianapolis, who curated the show and provided background research, and to Casey Roberts for his artistic expertise in installing the exhibit. And also many thanks to our collectors who have generously loaned their paintings to us for this event. Financial support from Indiana Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities is responsible for bringing one of our state's foremost art historians to the stage tonight. Rachel Berenson Perry is Fine Arts Curator Emerita of the Indiana State Museum, where she organized and curated all of the art exhibitions from 2003 through 2011. She has written numerous articles for American Art Review and Traces of Indiana and Midwestern History, winning the Jacob P. Dunn Award for Best Article in 2014, and the Dorothy Riker Hoosier Historian Award for making notable contributions to historic scholarship in 2017. Rachel has a Master's of Arts from the University of Oklahoma in liberal arts with museum emphasis, and a Bachelor of Arts from Indiana University with history and folklore emphasis. She's the author of numerous books on Indiana artists, including Painter of the Dunes, A Life of Frank Virgil Dudley, The Life and Art of Felrath Hines, From Dark to Light, co-authorship of Indiana Historical Society's bicentennial edition of The House of the Singing Winds, The Life and Work of T.C. Steele, William J. Forsythe, The Life and Work of an Indiana Artist, Painting Indiana 3, Heritage of Place, Barry Gelt, Embracing Nature, Paint and Canvas, and a biography of T.C. Steele. And I'm hoping maybe in the very near future, a book on Harry Davis. So welcome to the stage, Rachel Perry. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really an impressive introduction. Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming, because it's such a gorgeous day that if I had my druthers, I'd be outside someplace. We're so high tech here. I hope I can do this right. Okay. I also want to thank Indiana Landmarks in general for inviting me to do this. And again, Steve Town, the University Archivist at Ruth Lilly's Special Collections and Archives, artist and historian Ron Crane, Harry and Lois Davis's son, Mark, and Scott Thomas Hahn for his treatise on Harry Davis for the 2001 Art Museum of Greater Lafayette exhibition catalog. Most of the photos I'm going to be using in this talk are from the Ruth Lilly Special Collections, unless otherwise indicated. So Harry Allen Davis lived from 1914 to 2006, and he was a force to be reckoned with. His prolific output of artworks and legions of students made him a household name in Indiana's art circles. His personality, especially as he aged, became increasingly irascible, and while researching his life, I saw a lot of parallels between Harry's disposition and that of Hoosier Group artist William Forsythe. Neither one suffered fools gladly. So I had the privilege of knowing Harry a little bit through a social group in Indianapolis called Portfolio. And in the early 2000s, I got up to give a lecture, a slide lecture similar to this. And I was doing something similar to this. I was thanking people and telling about the genesis of the program I was going to give. And Harry said, "Get on with it. We want to see the pictures." So this is a photo of Harry around 1918. He was born to Harry Sr. and Eva in Hillsboro, Indiana on May 21st, 1914, and he was an only child. His father and he were very close until his father's death in the 1950s. And this is a picture of Harry and his father around 1920. At age 6, Harry moved with his parents to Brownsburg, where his father built their house while continuing his vocation as a traveling minister. Family income was always the struggle, and his father's pay was typically in food, such as extra garden produce, butchered meat, or joining parishioners' families for their dinners after the sermon. Harry learned to be frugal and careful with all of his possessions. His son, Mark, tells a family story of Harry receiving an apple for Christmas when he was a small boy. He treasured the apple so much that he saved it, and it rotted in his drawer. Harry often accompanied his father, traveling throughout Indiana to preach on the weekends. And this is Harry's high school graduation picture in 1932. Inspired by visiting artist demo at his school, Harry began making art, which he continued after his graduation from Brownsburg High School. He took portrait classes with Ernest Foster in Edgewood, painting live models for a year. Harry's father, his biggest fan, took him to see Wilbur Peet, the first director of the John Herron Art Institute in Indianapolis, and Harry was admitted as a student. Harry paid for his first year, but soon won scholarships that covered his remaining education. And this is a photo of Donald Mattison. With coffers in the red and dwindling student population in the thick of the Great Depression, Herron's board of directors hired Donald Magnus Mattison as the art school's first full-time director in the spring of 1933. A winner of the Prix de Rome in 1928 and a graduate of the Yale School of Fine Arts, he proposed an aggressive agenda to reverse the school's fortunes. Modeling the new program on the rigorous system of European studios, he reorganized all classes and disciplines. And when he did this in 1933, he fired most of the faculty that had been there for many, many years, including William Forsythe. Madison wanted students to set their sights beyond Indiana. From his first day at Herron, he committed himself publicly to equip and encourage new students to compete for the two great art prizes, the Prix de Rome and the Chalmer Paris Prize, for which no Herron student had previously tried. And this is a sketch called Artist Family. It belongs to Marianne Davis. Harry's early schoolwork featured narrative pen and ink sketches with figures. Here he depicts an artist, perhaps himself, creating artwork in the middle of family chaos. We can already see his accurate rendering skills and interest in reflecting movement throughout the piece. Always hardworking and ambitious, as soon as he knew about the grand Prix de Rome Prize in history, Harry entered. This nationwide contest, founded in 1663, honored the best in historical painting and other arts. The submission process required one major painting as well as a series of smaller sketches. This image of Negro revival won an honorable mention and was in several exhibitions later, including the 49th Annual Exhibition of American Artists in 1940. Likely painted from memory or imagination, it's interesting that Harry chose a preacher like his father and blacks as art subjects. From his lifelong works, the artist shows a marked empathy for the African-American experience, as well as his strong Christian faith. At the time, in 1938, the regionalist art movement, which revived America's enthusiasm for its own history and culture, was in full swing. Regionalism favored narrative scenes featuring everyday lives of the common man. Remembering farm dinners from traveling with his preacher father, Harry created a nostalgic composition with much activity and movement, which he entered in his second try for the Prix de Rome. And this is called Harvest Dinner. It was done in 1938. With Harvest Dinner, Harry won the Prix de Rome in the spring of 38, simultaneously with earning his BFA from Herron. He would be given a 2-year fellowship at the American Academy in Rome, as well as a painting studio and monthly stipend equaling $1,400 per year, which now would be $31,000, to cover travel expenses, purchase art materials, and buy incidentals. And this is a photo. Harry traveled to New York City for the first time and accepted the award. And in the photo, you'll see from left to right, Dr. Roscoe Guernsey, George Corrin, Harry, and Stuart Mertz. His father could not have been prouder. Reverend Harry Davis Sr. said that winning the art prize was the culmination of the dreams of all of us, according to the Indianapolis Times. Harry Davis, at age 24, set sail for Naples in the fall of 1938. This is a photo of the art students in Rome in 1939. From left to right is Norman Thomas, Harry standing up, Clifford Jones, Claude Montgomery, and Salvatore Scarpita. The fellowship granted its recipients free rein to travel and follow their own course of study. Harry toured other parts of Italy, taking in museums, galleries, and palaces in Florence and Venice for the first year. And then the following year explored Greece, Constantinople, Turkey, and Egypt, among other destinations. In the second year of his fellowship, Harry researched and produced several sketches in preparation for a 15-foot by 12-foot fresco on the inner wall of the American Academy, based on the sacking of Rome. There were several life-size figures in an ancient Greek temple. Despite his exciting and fulfilling life in Europe, Harry constantly worried about his father's finances. Excuse me. His dad earned $15 each time he traveled to a church, but his mother's chronic illness made him reluctant to leave her. A letter from his father read, quote, "Well, the part about it that I didn't tell you, and after your letter had gone, I wish so much I had told you, was that you shouldn't worry about the busted radiator, as the plumber charged me only $1.50 for helping me take that radiator out and cap the joints. There's still fire in the furnace, but I sort of wish I'd let it go out this morning since it's so warm, and we can't afford to run it if it's not necessary." In another letter, Harry's father wrote, quote, "We live awfully good without a great deal of expense, for I think about 4 or 5 people have given us meat, sausage side, hog pork chops, etc. this winter, and I think some of them will keep it up." Harry's father also facilitated sending the painting Negro Revival on tour. And by the way, Junior, he wrote, have you got a price on that painting? This is a picture of Harry with a camera in 1939. So by the second week of June 1940, Harry's large fresco was completed. But a few weeks later, although his 2-year fellowship wasn't yet over, Harry and other students were warned to leave Europe immediately since World War II had begun. Forced to leave all of his artwork except 3 small canvases, Harry was one of 280 passengers aboard the Excalibur, the last American boat out of the Mediterranean area on June 28th. Granted a 1-year extension of his scholarship, Harry stayed in New York City working in a rent-free studio. He was offered a position as artist in residence at Beloit College in Wisconsin, where he relocated in the winter of 1941. Following America's entry into the war after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, Harry felt duty-bound to enlist. After boot camp at Camp Livingston, Louisiana, Harry was assigned to the 84th Engineer Camouflage Battalion. Unimpressed with the quality of the other recruits, some of them unable to read or write, he vowed to make the best of the situation. The voyage overseas on a flat-bottomed landing ship took 31 days to get to Arzu and North African French Morocco. It's no fun to be headed out where you can see nothing but water, clear to the horizon, and not have the slightest idea where your destination is, he said. Creating camouflage became Harry's occupation. Quote, the art was kind of strange. Getting on airplanes and painting drab olive shapes all over the thing and designing some of the costumes, he remembered. But he threw himself into the work with the same dedication and care that he had given to his easel paintings. In December 1943, Harry learned that his battalion was supposed to join the U.S. Fifth Army in Italy. His initial gladness to be going to a more familiar territory was quickly squelched when he found the condition of Naples, where nightly German bombings had been taking place. He wrote about, quote, people crippled and maimed with eyes that burned of misery and fear. Quartered in the ruins of a castle on a hill overlooking Volturno River Valley, Davis was less pressured and able to explore his surroundings. Inspired by the sight of several peasant women working in a wheat field, he had time to create tillers of the grain. Using a chair for an easel, he cut a section of a pup tent for his canvas, stretched over a frame of tent stakes. The sizing and ground to paint upon was white camouflage emulsion. This I used as white pigment, he said, for the oil set that I accumulated did not contain white. 6 colors were all that I could gather, with 2 brushes and a palette knife. Creating the painting greatly improved his morale, a relief from the war and reminding him of, quote, Italy's real self among chaos. But despite his father's reassurances, Harry's worry about his family back home never abated. A 1944 letter from his father said, quote, we're getting along okay. I have all debts paid except $98 yet on the furnace note at the bank, but we'll be able to pay that soon and stop the interest. But during the summer, I haven't so many expenses and no taxes and no fire insurance to pay on the house. That comes about Christmas time. And then it doesn't take much for fuel and we will be in fairly good shape. And so I don't want you to worry a thing about home. Through a fortuitous meeting with a former acquaintance from the American Academy, whose name was Chester Starr, Chester had become a lieutenant colonel in the Fifth Army's historical section, and Harry was able to transfer as a staff artist to the 58th Infantry Division in September of 1944. His assignments were to sketch the infantrymen engaged in battle and at rest, then return to the historical section to produce more finished paintings. Quote, the finished work would be photographed, we would receive some prints, and then our work would become the property of the War Department, he wrote. In this sketch, Harry returns to one of his repeated subjects, an impromptu worship service in the field. So the next quote is from Ray Boomhauer. Wrote a wonderful article on traces of Indiana and Midwest history in the winter of 2022. For the winter months, Harry's work concentrated on capturing the dugouts and huts infantrymen constructed to give them some shelter from elements. While GIs of the 85th were out of the line and resting, with 5-day passes in hand, Harry produced sketches of them interacting with families, bargaining with local merchants, and having their laundry done and trying to make themselves understood using their rudimentary knowledge of the Italian language, as depicted in this sketch. Harry's time at the historical section impacted his methods. He had his first exposure to casein paint, a powder that is mixed with water. He learned how to use small strokes for pen and ink drawings, building up layers, and he began using a camera to capture subjects in a certain light. Painting from his photographs was a method that the artist used later in his career when painting structural images. When on leave, Harry returned to Rome for the first time since his American Academy days. While there, he fell in love with the country's classical architecture, a passion for older buildings that informed the direction of his later work. Harry mustered out of service on November 23rd, 1945, and this sketch conveys the exhaustion of a German prisoner at the end of World War II. Also, unfortunately, Harry's mother died one Christmas in the mid-1940s. She suffered from lifelong depression and committed suicide, according to Harry's son, Mark. After returning to the States, for more than a year, Harry attempted a career solely as a painter. Quote, I discovered early the only way to survive as an artist in Indiana was to have some kind of regular work. He accepted a teaching position at his alma mater, the John Herron Art Institute, in 1946. Unlike some art teachers who stopped their own creative output, Harry devised a disciplined schedule of working in his studio 2 days each week, combined with the teaching. Accustomed to painting scenes with numerous details and figures, his country auction captures a couple snagging treasures from a farm auction. Introduced by fellow artist Robert Weaver, Harry met Lois Peterson, a LaPorte, Indiana native. Lois was a student at Herron. We quickly became good friends, Lois remembered, but I didn't take any of his classes. He likes his students neat and dislikes walking into somebody's palette and getting paint on himself. If I'd been in his class, that might have happened because I'm a messy painter. She won a $1,000 Millikan Award for travel and attended the Mexico City College in the summer of 1947. Harry and Lois were married December 20th, 1947 at Harry Sr.'s house in Brownsburg, where the couple lived. For a time, Harry supplemented his teaching income by building houses, also building a house in Brownsburg for his own family. Though he found the building trade to be too taxing, his knowledge of structures informed his later subject matter. I feel like I should do jumping jacks now because everybody's kind of, you know. Okay. Harry was not an outdoors boy, according to his father in a news article, so landscapes were not favorite painting subjects. Unlike the Hoosier group painters or the Brown County colonists, Harry was not particularly fond of tramping around in untamed nature. I included the simple but effective autumn landscape, painted in 1951, to illustrate his subdued style. This painting of a farmer would have been more in Harry's early wheelhouse, depicting a figure's clothing and character. So this is a photo of the Herron faculty in 1953. Harry, who looks really happy there, is on the left, and then Donald Madison, Edmund Brucker, and David Rubens in 1953. Harry taught painting and drawing at Herron for 37 years and was respected by his colleagues and students alike. A former student, Sarah Love, who took a life drawing class, remembered Harry as a strict teacher who said what he thought. He wasn't mean, she said, but straightforward in his critiques. He never did painting demonstrations. He became less patient later in life. Everyone was intimidated by him. But he did have a dry sense of humor. One time, she remembered, a little dog ran through the classroom. "Well, the school's gone to the dogs," Harry commented. And this charming depiction of folks at a picnic done in 1957, preparing to roast hot dogs, is one of my favorite images. The movement of the piece and the stylized shading give the impression of a sketch for a mural rather than an easel painting. By 1959, Harry and Lois had two children, Joanna, who was born in 1949, and Mark, who was born in 1959. Lois temporarily sidetracked her art career to raise the children, while Harry continued painting and teaching. The Davis family moved in 1960 to 6315 Washington Boulevard in Indianapolis. Harry did a lot of the house improvements himself and built a new double garage behind the house. And now we come to what you've all been waiting for. This imagined scene is modeled after the Browning Burford building at 1330 North Meridian. For all intents and purposes, this painting marks the beginning of Harry's pivot to painting architecture. The reasons for his involvement to his future style and subjects were numerous, according to writer Scott Thomas Kahn in his 2001 exhibition catalog. Number one was Harry's return to Europe during World War II, which opened his eyes to the beauty and majesty of architecture in Italy. Number two, he was very much influenced by his idol, Giovanni Antonio Canaletto, who painted from 1697 to 1768 and painted accurate renderings of Italian buildings in the 17th century. According to Harry, quote, buildings have been rebuilt from Canaletto's paintings. Number three, the unpopularity of figure works after the 1950s inspired experimentation with painting methods. Harry tried a spatter technique using a spray gun and sponges to activate the surface of the paper, board, or the canvas. Quote, I developed a textural base that helped to express a sculptural quality, he commented. He used this method initially with tree designs and then evolved into painting buildings. He also changed from oil to acrylics in 1960. Number four, Harry's experience as a house builder, as I've already said, informed his knowledge of structure and the volume of buildings. And number five, the desire to document disappearing buildings and monuments. Quote, I've got my whole life's work laid out for me as long as there are any 19th century buildings standing, so I better get to work, he remarked. Seeing the destruction of beautiful old buildings in Indianapolis felt to Harry like losing old friends. It makes me mad, he said. We have no power to save those buildings from big business and the government. As our cities are taking on a new look in steel, concrete, and glass, there is an era of beautiful, ornate, and interesting 19th century architecture that is passing into history. When he saw that the Marion County Courthouse was to be demolished, he decided to preserve it in a painting in 1964. And this image is courtesy of John Rapp. The War Memorial was under construction from 1926 to 1965. I'm assuming that Harry used his imagination to depict parts of this image when the memorial was in its finishing stages. Typically, Harry used photographs to capture the desired light and composition. He sometimes waited until the perfect time for this. After photographing, Harry also made detailed sketches and a rough sketch on the canvas. Once satisfied with the composition, he pre-mixed all his paint colors that he would be using before beginning his work. Although skilled in watercolor, pen and ink sketching, he preferred using acrylic paint. This medium is water soluble and dries quickly, with the advantage of being able to thin with water. The artist can easily layer and correct. Although some artists disparage painting from photographs, there's no doubt that Harry was accomplished at rendering accurately when painting from life. He was also skilled at painting from imagination, which takes a different kind of proficiency. And a lot of you will recognize this Riley home in Lockerbie, and this is courtesy of Jeffrey Veldhoff. Harry approached his paintings of buildings much like a portrait artist in capturing the essence of a person. Quote, as in the painting of an older person, the lines and blemishes that come with age add character to the countenance, he had said. Some structures are more handsome than others merely because of the arrangement of shapes, just as in a human face. The weathering of many a storm and survival against the elements can add greatly to the fascination of an old building. Details such as ornamentation or the placements of shapes of windows and doorways can be aesthetically satisfying. And this is called Tomorrow the Interchange. Construction of I-465, which circles Marion County in central Indiana, started in 1959. The first section opened in 1961, and the final section was completed in 1970. The last segments of I-65 and I-70 through downtown Indianapolis were completed in 1976. This graphic depiction of a neglected area waiting to be cleared illustrates the transition. And this is called a segment of the inner city, also done in 1968. This rendering, using white laundry and an old reddish bench for interest, has a regionalist flair. Hanging laundry was a favorite subject for many artists, including the Impressionists. Though Harry was deep into his architectural paintings, he occasionally returned to figure compositions. Following an exhibit at the Jewish Community Center in December of 1969, art critic in the Indianapolis News, Richard Warham, wrote a scathing review. Quote, the heroic scale and gesture of the figure paintings does not make up for the lack of appeal. Davis doesn't seem to like what he paints, and consequently one wonders why he chooses to paint these subjects. The glance of the figure heavenward in this painting, The Art Student, is the only real indication of what is evident to a lesser extent in the entire show, that Davis is really afraid to look his subject or his viewer straight in the eye. The criticism of The Art Student must have been a blow to the artist, who was winning major kudos for his artwork. In the 1970 annual Hoosier Salon exhibition, he won the show's top merit awards for a combined purse of almost $10,000. Two of his architectural paintings, the Athenaeum, which you're looking at now, and this image is courtesy of Clayton Miller, and also a painting called West Side Drugstore, were declared co-winners by the jury. His double victory would signal the start of a 20-year pattern in which Harry Davis would win at least one award every year in the Hoosier Salon. The Athenaeum, originally Das Deutsche Haus, the German house, excuse me, is the most ornate and best preserved building affiliated with the German American community of Indianapolis. It's located at 401 East Michigan Street. Construction of the East Wing began in May of 1893 and was finished in 1894. And the West Wing construction started in 1897 and was completed a year later. German-American architects Bernard Vonnegut Sr. was the grandfather of Indianapolis novelist Kurt Vonnegut, and Arthur Bone designed both wings. It was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1973, and on October 31, 2016, was named the 41st National Historic Landmark in Indiana. And here we have Harry painting a picture of his daughter, Joanna. Joanna followed in her parents' footsteps, attending Herron in photography and graphic art and becoming the art director at the Indianapolis Children's Museum. Her brother, Mark, didn't quite fit the mold. He was a rough and tumble kid who loved sports. He played football in high school and said that his dad did not approve. His parents never attended his games. Quote, everything revolved around the art community, Mark said, and all family revolved around Harry. He was a picky professor, a neat freak, and a perfectionist, and he brought that attitude home with him. He was authoritarian, self-involved, and extremely frugal. He was very conservative and religious and read the Bible every day. As he aged, perhaps understandably, Harry became more irritable and vociferous. At Portfolio Club, he caused arguments about the cost of mailing postcards, etc. This painting shows a similar sensibility as the end of an era, but from an authentic scene. It's at 460 Virginia Avenue, built in 1876. And this is a segment of Indiana Avenue, 1971. Dr. Maynard K. Hine, Dean of the IU School of Dentistry, began working with then Mayor of Indianapolis, Richard Lugar, IU President Joseph Sutton, Purdue President Frederick Hovde, and others to establish IUPUI in 1969 through the merger of the Indianapolis extension programs of both IU and Purdue. And of course, now, as you know, it's all gone back over to IU. The IU-PUI campus covers 536 acres and is located in downtown Indianapolis along the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, just 2 blocks west of the Indiana State House and adjacent to White River State Park. The establishment of IU-PUI campus replaced an entire Black neighborhood near once thriving Indiana Avenue. In the 1974 Hoosier Salon catalog, it said, quote, the awards ceremony was pretty much a family affair for the Davises of Indianapolis. Harry Davis, a member of the faculty of the Herron Art School who makes a habit of winning, was awarded the $500 Blocks Merit Prize for outstanding work in any medium. Lois Davis, his wife, took home the $150 first prize for portrait or figure composition. After 29 years of teaching with no breaks, a sabbatical in 1975 allowed Davis to complete 32 works depicting sites in southern Indiana. A grant provided the funds to transport the exhibit, which was called a segment of the historic Ohio River Valley, to galleries in the Midwest as part of the 1976 bicentennial celebration. Needing more space for this project, Harry, with his son Mark's help, converted the double garage behind the house into a large studio space. The artist began wearing a beret during noon hours to protect his head from the newly installed skylight. While Harry enjoyed his expanded studio space, he commented, quote, Lois, poor thing, had to put up with a little space in the house down in the basement and then upstairs in an unused bedroom. I just wanted to put a plug in for the Culbertson Mansion. If you haven't been there in New Albany, they have restored all of the decorative painting on the ceilings and walls And it's really an amazing thing to behold. So if you're ever in the New Albany area, be sure to stop by there. Another iconic building documented by Harry, the implosion of Market Square Arena on July 8th, 2001 took less than 15 seconds and was an event to witness. I was there. But if you're interested in seeing it, they have several YouTube documents of that happening. And this is a segment of a cathedral in Florence. So a second sabbatical in 1983 resulted in the traveling show called Here and There, the Italian Influence, where Harry compared the architecture of Indiana with that of Italy. Because of his fascination with Hoosier architecture, Harry received the Servas Memorial Award from the Indiana Landmarks Foundation, and he retired from teaching that year as well in 1982. This is on the northwest corner of West and New York streets, and it was demolished in 1986. Scottish surveyor Alexander Ralston's original plan for Indianapolis called for a town of 1 square mile near the confluence of the White River and Fall Creek. Known as the Mile Square, the plan followed the grid pattern centered on a traffic circle called Monument Circle, from which Indianapolis gets its name, Circle City. This building on northwest corner of West and New York streets was, as I said, demolished in 1986. And I was interested in the perspective that he painted along with the angled lettering that shows off Harry's skill and attention to detail. A year earlier, the Davis family lost Joanna, their daughter, to cancer. Harry's lifelong bouts with depression were exacerbated by the loss, according to his son, Mark. Perhaps inspired by Lois's success with figurative social statements, Harry painted Life in the Fast Lane, a commentary on crowded grocery store shopping in the city. For an exhibit in 2019 at Ball State David Owsley Museum featuring John Otis Adams and wife Winifred, I collaborated with Indianapolis Museum of Art former curator Marty Krause on an article about artist couples. We wrote, quote, "The making of art among all professions is a solitary, self-absorbed, and egocentric occupation, hardly descriptors of conjugal success. The issue of a successful marriage has been most commonly resolved in deference to the husband's career, with the wife sublimating hers or abandoning it altogether. In the case of the Davises, Lois chose a different subject matter." And this is called Human Nature. With people crowding into the proverbial Roach Motel instead of opting for the educational pavilion, Lois Davis pokes gentle fun at mass appeal in this 1992 painting. She painted things that were important to her socially. As a result, she became well known for her studies of people, and her artwork addressed issues such as women's rights, loss of privacy in the computer age, and the indignities of war. For more than 30 years, she taught painting at the Indianapolis Art Center, where her classes were so popular that students sometimes had to draw a winning number from a hat to even attend. Harry called this Circle Center Carnival. He enjoyed painting construction in progress, where he could capture activity as well as architecture. The grand opening of the Circle Center Mall occurred on September 8th, 1995. The mall incorporated many of the existing downtown buildings, including the former LS Airs, and a sky bridge and arch garden were built on the second floor to connect the ends of the mall over the streets below. And this is a photo of the opening of the Arts Garden and Circle Center Mall on September 8th. It's a I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Banayot photo from the Indianapolis Historical Society archives. And the image shows the arts garden and surrounding buildings with a ribbon tied around them. The celebration of the opening event included this decoration and fireworks on the evening of September 8th, 1995. With what appears now to be somewhat dated imagery, Lois's invasion of privacy still gets the message across. I had the pleasure of visiting Lois in her bedroom studio while curating a women's exhibit at the Indiana State Museum in 2003 and chose this painting to be included. Trying to convey a social statement using imagery is an admirable skill. Lois accomplished this in a humorous and inclusive way. And this photo of Harry and Lois was taken by Patty Owings. Harry and Lois were an affectionate couple, but Harry was the undoubted alpha. At a gala dinner celebrating the Hoosier Salon's 75th anniversary in 1999, the Davises were seated at the keynote speaker's table. The speaker was previewing his remarks for them, highlighting those artists who had had the most extensive exhibition records and who had won the most significant honors. Lois, he noted, had exhibited in 28 annuals and had won the 1975 Best in Show. Well, I won 10 times, Harry abruptly interjected, unnecessarily preempting the speaker's pending enumeration of Harry's achievements. Lois, as always, was nonplussed. She had achieved equilibrium in life, at least outwardly. I am well known as Harry's wife, she acknowledged in 1972, but I have my own fans too. Mine tend to be younger people almost entirely, and that pleases me very much. This is a photo of Lois later in life in 2008. Harry Davis died February 9th, 2006. Lois moved to Texas in 2011 to be near her son and lived another 10 years. She continued to draw and sketch, although not to paint. One of the things that most impressed me when researching Harry was his prolific output simultaneously with his full-time occupation as an art instructor. He painted more than 900 major easel paintings, as recorded by historian and artist Ron Crane. Harry Allen Davis was hugely productive, hardworking, and a man of faith and loyalty. He left us with two legacies: his detailed war illustrations housed at the Pentagon and architectural documentation of countless houses and buildings in Indiana. As Harry once said, I've got my whole life's work laid out for me as long as there are any 19th century buildings standing. In today's media, advice to seniors who wish to remain vibrant is keep moving, maintain an active social life, and find a purpose. Harry Davis followed all of those guidelines and accomplished a life well lived. Thank you. So I'm supposed to ask for questions, but they need to be art related and not architecturally related because I know nothing about architecture. And we have some real experts here who do know about architecture, and they can answer those questions, especially if you go downstairs to see the exhibit, and they can talk to you about the paintings that you see there. Are there any questions? Yay, I've really intimidated you now. Okay. Thank you. Oh. Well, there was one gentleman back here.
I'm curious, you mentioned the pad for the old building paintings. Do we know how many of his paintings are
Already gone? I don't know the answer. That's really a good question, though. I mean, that would be pretty easy to research. And I didn't do that, but that's a really great question. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Did Harry Davis's father have a denominational affiliation, or was he?
He was a Protestant, but he wasn't, I don't know. I mean, if he was like, I don't know if it was a Baptist or what. I just know he was Protestant. I think, he just kind of filled in when people didn't have a minister for a week or whatever. He would just go and fill in. Anybody? Oh,
Excuse me.
where am I? Oh,
I'm a member of Northwood Christian Church in Indianapolis, and Harry and Lois were there
yeah.
in the 50s. And we have several paintings from Lois, as well as one of Harry's called Fishers of Men.
Nice.
Excellent painting.
Wow, that's really nice. Thank you.
We had a question from Zoom that asked if Harry's mural paintings still exist. Did he paint a mural?
Well, he did paint a mural in Europe, but I doubt whether that still exists. I don't know of other murals. Oh, I've got a marsh.
Should he take this architectural work with largely photographs or photographic?
Well, I think he photographed them and then made sketches, and then, I mean, as I described the process, I think he did use photographs, and it would make it a lot easier to, to get the perspective right. But even photographs, can really distort things, as you know. So I think, I think he did use photographs. Anybody else? Oh,
he obviously had very, very distinctive style. He did people and another style that he did buildings. Did he ever talk about, the difference between those two, that he basically took people in a very kind of figurative way, and buildings were very, very
well,
different.
I didn't find it. I mean, I didn't go through when I have to tell you, I was shocked when I went to the IUPUI collection. I had asked Steve Town for Harry Davis material. There were 43 boxes. So I'll have to admit, I didn't really, go through all of them. It was really hard to find. He did write a journal. He wrote a very detailed journal of his experiences when he was in the Army. But after that, almost all of the material were letters that had been written to him rather than his own letters. So, so I didn't really find a lot of stuff about, what he was thinking. But he did say that he felt like buildings were, like people. He felt that they had character like people have, and all that. But I really, myself, I really enjoy the figurative things that he did earlier. But I like figures, so it's very subjective.
There's a question over here.
I was curious about the Athenaeum portrait. Was that once owned by Senator Richard Lugar? Do you know?
There might be a person in the audience that would know that.
And the reason I'm asking is he featured that in a family Christmas card. It was very prominent in the family portrait.
But would Richard Lugar have been likely to let that painting go? I don't know. Sometimes, it's possible he did more than one. But this one, belongs to Clayton Miller, so I don't know if he has the provenance for that or not. But That's really interesting.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, I'm not batting 100 here on my answers.
All right, well, we want to thank everybody so much for attending. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Want to thank all of our members here that are helping us save a lot of the meaningful places, many of which are featured in Harry's paintings and some that you'll see downstairs. So thank you so much again for coming, and be sure to check indianalandmarks.org for upcoming programs, including a concert that we have to recognize Juneteenth. And so now we have a reception in Cook Theater, and then the gallery is open downstairs, the Rapp Family Gallery. So if you'll exit this way, we'll have some people guide you down there, and Rachel will be there for a while too if you've got more questions. So thank you again.